my father. A man who measures a person's worth in stock prices and country club memberships, once referred to my husband, Liam, as the man who grows my salad. He said it at a large, opulent dinner party, a slight, amused smile on his face, and his friends had all laughed. A polite, cruel titter of rich people enjoying a joke at the expense of a man who worked the earth with his own 2 hands. My husband, the man I loved more than anything in the world, the man with kind eyes and a quiet strength I had never seen in my father's world of hostile takeovers and brittle smiles. To my father, Liam's calloused hands were not a symbol of his hard work and integrity. They were a badge of his failure, my failure, the failure of his daughter, Annalise, a graduate of Vassar with a degree in art history, to marry a man of equal or greater station instead. I had married a simple farmer, and I had never been happier. Have you ever made a choice that made you incredibly, profoundly happy, but that your family just could not understand or respect? It's a tough, lonely spot to be in. If you've ever had to choose your own happiness over your family's approval, give this video a like, because you'll understand the war I had been fighting for the last 5 years. Our farm is 100 acres of rolling hills in upstate New York. It's not a massive agribusiness, it's a small, sustainable, organic operation. We grow heirloom tomatoes. Kale, that's a deep, vibrant purple, a dozen different kinds of herbs. We have a flock of cheerful, noisy chickens that lay beautiful, pastel-colored eggs. We sell our produce at the local farmers market on Saturdays. And I run a small but successful online business, selling artisanal jams and preserves I make in our big, warm kitchen. It is a life of hard, physical work. I wake up with the sun, my fingernails are never perfectly clean. My back aches at the end of a long day of harvesting. To my father, it is a life of squalor. To me, it is the most beautiful, most honest life I could ever have imagined. The world I had left behind was a world of suffocating perfection. I grew up in a massive, silent mansion in Greenwich, Connecticut, a house where the carpets were always vacuumed in perfect, straight lines, and the flowers in the vases were replaced by a florist twice a week. My childhood was a series of lessons, ballet lessons, piano lessons, French lessons, lessons in how to be the perfect, polished daughter of Edward Sterling, the CEO of a private equity firm. My life was a track, laid out for me from birth, prestigious boarding school, then an Ivy League college, then a sensible job at an auction house or an art gallery, and then the ultimate goal, a marriage to a man from a similar background, a man whose name carried weight, whose family had a summer cottage in Newport, whose portfolio was as impressive as his bloodline. I had tried, for 22 years, I had tried to be the daughter he wanted. I endured the debutante balls, the charity luncheons with his friends' wives, the endless, subtle pressure, but my heart wasn't in it. It felt like I was playing a part in a very long, very boring play. And then, during a summer internship at a museum, I met Liam. He wasn't part of the art world. He was the man who delivered the fresh, organic produce to the museum's little cafe. He was quiet. He had kind eyes. And he had a laugh that felt real, not practiced. He smelled of earth and sunshine, not of money and cologne. He was the most authentic person I had ever met. Our courtship was a secret at first. I would meet him at the farmer's market on Saturday mornings, leaving my father's world of manicured lawns and polite conversation for his world of vibrant, chaotic life. We fell in love over piles of fresh-picked strawberries and the smell of damp soil. Bringing him home to meet my father was one of the most terrifying moments of my life. I knew what my father would see. He wouldn't see the kind, intelligent, and deeply honorable man I loved. He would see a pair of dirt-stained, calloused hands, and he did. We were in my father's study, a room of dark wood and intimidating silence. Liam, bless his heart, had worn his best clothes and had brought my father a bottle of expensive whiskey. My father looked at Liam's outstretched hand, and then at Liam's face. "So, Annalise tells me you're a farmer," he'd said, his voice dripping with a condescension so thick it was almost a physical thing. "What is it, exactly, that you do with all that dirt, Liam? To his eternal credit, did not flinch. He just smiled his slow, easy smile. "Well, sir," he'd said, his voice calm and steady, "I put seeds in it. I nurture them. I help them grow. And then I feed people. I suppose it's not as exciting as a hostile takeover, but the returns are a bit more satisfying." My father had just grunted and turned away. The war had begun. He tried everything to break us up. He offered to pay for me to get a master's degree in London. He set me up on blind dates with the sons of his business partners. Just for fun. He would make constant, cutting jokes at my expense. "Is Annalise there?" he'd ask when I called him. "Or is she too busy churning butter?" When I told him we were getting married, he was silent for a full minute. Then he said, "I see. And where is this ceremony to take place? In a barn?" As a matter of fact, yes, I had replied, my voice defiant. "We're getting married in the old barn on our property. It's beautiful." He had come to the wedding, of course. He couldn't afford the social embarrassment of not attending his only daughter's wedding, but he had walked through the whole event with a look of barely concealed disgust on his face. Our wedding was beautiful. We had strung fairy lights in the rafters of the old, sweet-smelling barn. Our friends had all helped us cook the food. We had a bluegrass band. It was a celebration of love and community. To my father, it was a hickfest. His wedding toast was a masterpiece of passive aggression. "To Annalise," he'd said, raising his glass of champagne, "who has always marched to the beat of her own, very rustic drum. She has chosen a life of simplicity, and she has found a man who shares that ambition. We wish them all the best." He had practically spat the word simplicity as if it were a poison. But Liam was my rock. He was completely, beautifully, and infuriatingly unbothered by my father's snobbery. He saw my father not as a powerful, intimidating titan of industry, but as a small, sad man who had mistaken wealth for worth. "Don't let him get to you, Annie," he'd say to me after a particularly awful phone call with my dad. He would take my hands in his own warm, strong ones. "He can't see the value in this life because he's never done an honest day's work in his hands are soft, his heart is soft. Don't let him harden yours." And so, I built my life with him. A life of quiet, hard-won joy. I had my business, my jams and preserves, which were gaining a following. I had my garden. I had my husband. I had chosen my own kind of wealth. A wealth measured in sunsets and ripe tomatoes and the deep. A biding piece of a life lived with integrity. I still spoke to my father once a week. The conversations were always the same, a stilted, 5-minute exchange where he would ask about the weather and I would ask about his health. He would never ask about Liam by name. He would only ever refer to him as your farmer. "How is your farmer?" he'd ask, the sneer audible even through the phone lines. "He's well, Dad," I'd reply, my voice a calm, even wall he could not penetrate. "The farm is well." I had made my peace with our fractured relationship. I knew he would never approve of my life, of my choice, of the man I loved. I knew that in his eyes. I would always be a disappointment. I had learned to live with it. We were sitting on our porch swing one evening last month, watching the sunset over the rolling hills of our farm. The air was cool and smelled of hay and damp earth. Liam's arm was around my shoulders, and our dog, a scruffy mutt named Barnaby, was asleep at our feet. It was a perfect, quiet moment, a snapshot of the simple, beautiful life we had built. I felt a profound sense of peace. My father in his world of judgment felt a million miles away. I had everything I had ever truly wanted. Right here on this porch. It was the calm before the storm, the quiet before the world turned upside down. We were just a simple farmer and his wife, watching a sunset, completely unaware that a letter, bearing the wax seal of a European duchy we had never heard of, was already in the mail, on its way to shatter our peaceful existence forever. The rhythm of our life on the farm was a quiet, steady heartbeat. It was governed by the seasons, by the slow, patient turning of the earth. A typical day for us was a meditation in simple, meaningful work. We'd wake with the sun, have coffee on the porch while listening to the birds, and then head out to the fields. Liam, with his quiet strength and innate understanding of the land, would tend to the crops, his movements efficient and sure. I would spend my mornings in the gardens, harvesting the herbs and fruits that were ready, my hands stained with the sweet juice of raspberries or the sharp, clean scent of rosemary. In the afternoons, I'd be in our big, sunny kitchen, the air thick with the smell of simmering fruit and sugar as I worked on new recipes for my preserves business. It was a good life. It was a real life. And it was a million light years away from the world I had been raised in. It was a world my father could not, and would not, ever try to understand. The letter that would shatter our peaceful existence arrived on a Tuesday, tucked between a seed catalog and a bill from the electric company. The mail carrier usually just leaves our mail in the box at the end of our long, gravel driveway, but that day, he drove his little truck all the way up to the house. "Got something for you here." "Liam?" he called out as my husband was fixing a fence post. "Looks important. Has to be signed for coming all the way from Europe." By the looks of it, Liam wiped his sweaty brow and took the envelope. And I, walking over from the garden with a basket of fresh basil, stopped in my tracks when I saw it. It was unlike any piece of mail I had ever seen. It was made of a heavy, cream-colored parchment that felt like it was from another century. The stamps were strange and ornate, bearing the profile of a stern-looking man with a crown, and my husband's name, Mr. Liam Hayes, was written on the front in a beautiful, flowing calligraphy. But it was the back of the envelope that made my breath catch. It was sealed not with glue, but with a thick, deep red wax seal, and pressed into the center of the wax was an intricate coat of arms I had never seen before. A roaring lion on one side, a sheaf of golden wheat on the other, under a small, elegant crown. "What in the world?" Liam said, turning the heavy envelope over in his work-roughened hands. It looked completely out of place, a piece of a forgotten, formal world dropped into our simple, rustic one. We took it inside and sat at our worn, wooden kitchen table. Liam carefully broke the seal with a butter knife. He pulled out a single, thick sheet of matching parchment. The letterhead at the top was embossed in gold with the same coat of arms, and beneath it, in stately, serifed font, were the words from the office of the ducal chancellery of the sovereign duchy of Altenburg. "The what of where now?" Liam said, a slow, amused grin spreading across his face. We read the letter together, our heads bent over the strange, formal document. The language was stiff, archaic, and utterly baffling. "We are writing to inform you on behalf of the office of His Serene Highness, the late Duke Friedrich IV of Altenburg," it began. "It has come to our attention through extensive genealogical research that you, Mr. Liam Hayes, may be a person of significant interest in a matter of great national importance, pertaining to the succession of the ducal line." I looked at Liam, he looked at me, and then we both started to laugh. "Is this a joke?" I said, my voice full of mirth. "A prank. Did one of your buddies from the farmer's market put you up to this?" "If they did, they went to a lot of trouble," he said, still chuckling as he read on. "A matter of great national importance. What, did I win their national turnip festival?" The letter went on to formally request an audience with him, stating that a representative from the chancellery, a man named Klaus Hoffmann, would be contacting him within the week to arrange a meeting in person to discuss the matter further. It was signed with a flourish by some Baron von Kessler, Chancellor of Altenburg. "Altenburg," I said, pulling out my phone. "I've never even heard of it. Let me Google it." It turned out it was a real place, a tiny postage stamp-sized country, a sovereign duchy, to be exact, nestled in a mountain valley between Austria and Germany. It was known for three things: its staggering beauty, its secretive banking laws, and its complete and utter irrelevance on the world stage. It was the kind of place that seemed to exist only in old storybooks. The absurdity of it all was overwhelming. We spent the rest of the afternoon making jokes. It had to be an elaborate scam, the most high-effort, fanciest Nigerian prince scam in history. "I bet this Mr. Hoffman will tell me I'm the heir to a secret fortune," Liam laughed. "And all I have to do is give him my bank account details and a small processing fee of $5,000 to unlock it. Don't forget your social security number," I added, giggling. "To verify your royal identity?" We propped the letter up on the mantelpiece in the living room, a bizarre, hilarious curiosity. But even as we joked about it, A small, quiet part of my mind couldn't shake the feeling that it was real. The quality of the paper, the weight of the seal, the formality of the language, it was all too perfect, too expensive, for a simple prank or a common scam. A tiny, nagging question mark had been placed in the middle of our quiet, predictable life. A few days later, during my weekly, obligatory phone call with my father, I decided to tell him about it as a funny anecdote. I thought, perhaps naively, that the sheer absurdity of it might amuse him. "You will not believe the craziest thing that happened this week." "Dad," I began, trying to keep my tone light and breezy. "Liam got this letter in the mail. It looked like something out of the 18th century. Apparently, it was from the ducal chancellery of some tiny little European country called Altenburg. And they seem to think he's a long-lost royal, or something. Can you believe it?" We had a good laugh about it. There was a moment of silence on the other end of the line, and then I heard my father's familiar, dry, condescending chuckle. "Oh, that is rich," he said, his voice dripping with a familiar, weary sarcasm. "A royal your farmer. How utterly perfect. And what is his title to be the Prince of Parsnips?" "Dad, it's obviously a scam or a joke," I said, my good humor already beginning to fade. "Of course, it is, Annalise," he said, "but one must admire the ambition of it. I wouldn't have thought your farmer had it in him. So, tell me, when are you two moving into the royal palace? Or is it a renovated barn with a particularly nice view of the manure heap? I simply must know." "That's not funny," I said, my voice growing cold. "Oh, I think it's hilarious," he countered, clearly enjoying himself. "So how should I address him now? Is it Your Royal Highness? Or should I just stick with, 'Hey, farm boy, could you pass the potatoes?' It's all so confusing." His words were like a series of tiny, sharp pebbles, each one hitting a fresh bruise. He had an incredible talent for taking any piece of my life, any small joy or strange anecdote, and twisting it into a weapon to be used against me, to remind me of how deeply I had disappointed him. "Why do you always have to be so cruel?" I asked, my voice a quiet, tired whisper. "I'm not being cruel, Annalise," he said with a sigh, his tone now shifting to one of a long-suffering parent dealing with a hysterical child. "I am being a realist. And the reality is, you married a man who digs in the dirt for a living. The idea of him being royalty is laughable. And I find it concerning that you seem to be entertaining this fantasy for even a second. It shows a lack of judgment." "I'm not entertaining it," I shot back, my own anger rising. "I was just telling you a funny story." "Well, it's not funny to me," he said coolly. "It's sad. It shows me that your life is so small, so provincial, that a ridiculous piece of mail from some imaginary duke is the most exciting thing that has happened to you all year. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a board meeting to attend. In the real world. Goodbye, Annalise." And he hung up. I stood in my kitchen, my phone pressed to my ear, listening to the dial tone. The warmth of the room was gone, replaced by the familiar, chilling cold of his disapproval. He had done it again. He had taken a small, silly, happy thing, and he had stomped on it with the heel of his expensive, handmade Italian shoe. Liam found me a few minutes later, still standing there, my eyes full of angry tears. He knew instantly. "Your father?" he asked gently. I just nodded, unable to speak. He came and wrapped his strong, warm arms around me. "What did he say this time?" I told him about the letter. I mumbled into his chest. "He called you the Duke of Dirt." Liam was silent for a moment. Then he let out a low, rumbling laugh. "The Duke of Dirt," he repeated, a grin in his voice. "I kind of like it. It has a certain earthy ring to it. Don't you think?" I pulled back and looked at him, and I couldn't help but laugh through my tears. This was why I loved him. His quiet, unshakable sense of self. My father's insults, which felt like daggers to me, just slid right off his back. He was so comfortable in his own skin, so confident in the life we had built, that my father's snobbery couldn't touch him. "I hate him sometimes," I whispered. "I know," he said, his expression softening, "but don't let his world poison ours. Annie, this is our kingdom. Right here. And I'd rather be the Duke of this dirt with you than the king of anything else without you." He kissed me, and for a moment, I let the warmth of his love push away the cold of my father's judgment. We tried to forget about the letter, We dismissed it as a joke, a scam, a strange piece of mail that was now a funny story we could tell. But the letter was still there, propped up on our mantelpiece, its elegant calligraphy and its mysterious wax seal, a quiet, insistent question mark in our lives. And at the bottom of the letter was the one sentence we had tried to ignore. Our representative, Mr. Hoffman, will be taking the liberty of calling you within the week to arrange the details of his visit. The phone call came on Friday. The phone call came on a Friday afternoon, while I was in the kitchen, my hands covered in flour, rolling out dough for a pie. The phone rang, and it was an unknown number with a strange international code. My first instinct was to ignore it, assuming it was a spam call. But then I remembered the letter on the mantelpiece, with its ominous final sentence. A knot of nervous curiosity tightened in my stomach. I wiped my hands on my apron and answered. "Hello." "Good afternoon," a man's voice said. It was a beautiful voice, a deep, resonant baritone with a faint, unplaceable European accent. The English was perfect, formal, and precise. "Am I speaking with Mr. Liam Hayes?" "No, this is his wife, Annalise." I said, "Can I help you?" "Ah, Mrs. Hayes. A pleasure. My name is Klaus Hoffman. I am calling from the Ducal Chancellery in Altenburg. I believe you received our letter." My heart did a little flip. It was real, or at least, the person who sent the ridiculous letter was real. "Yes, we did," I said, trying to sound casual, unimpressed. "Excellent," he said. "As stated in our correspondence, I am the representative who has been tasked with discussing this important matter with your husband in person. I have just arrived in New York, and I was hoping to arrange a time to visit you at your property. Would Sunday afternoon be convenient?" I was so taken aback. I couldn't think of what to say. He was here, in New York, and he wanted to come to our farm. A part of me wanted to laugh and tell him not to waste his time with his silly scam. But his voice, it was so serious, so utterly devoid of any hint of deception. It was the voice of a man conducting important business. Yes," I stammered. "I suppose Sunday would be fine. Around 2 o'clock. "Perfect," he said. "I look forward to meeting you and your husband then. Goodbye, Mrs. Hayes." He hung up. I stood in my kitchen, my heart pounding. A representative from the imaginary duchy was coming to our farm. The joke was getting more elaborate by the minute. When I told Liam, he just threw his head back and laughed. "Oh, this is fantastic," he said. "We have to play along. Should I wear a crown? Should we roll out a red carpet on the gravel driveway?" We spent the next 2 days in a state of amused anticipation. We joked about what we would serve our royal emissary. We decided on lemonade and my apple pie. Nothing, we figured, was more disarmingly American than that. We were treating it as a piece of theater, a bizarre and entertaining interruption to our quiet lives. But underneath the jokes, there was a tiny, persistent hum of something. A question mark. A sense of unreality. Sunday afternoon was warm and sunny, at exactly 2 o'clock. As we were sitting on the porch swing, we saw it. A sleek, black Mercedes-Benz sedan. The kind you see in diplomatic motorcades. Turning off the main road and onto our long, gravel driveway. It moved slowly, its polished surface a stark, alien black against the vibrant green of our fields. It looked like a spaceship had just landed in the middle of our farm. The car pulled to a stop. A driver in a black suit got out and opened the rear passenger door, and from it emerged Mr. Klaus Hoffman. He was not what I expected. He was a man in his late 50s, tall and distinguished, with silvering hair at his temples and a face that was both kind and intensely serious. He was dressed in a perfectly tailored, dark gray suit that probably cost more than our tractor. He carried a handsome, well-worn leather briefcase. He looked less like a scam artist and more like a visiting head of state. Liam and I, in our work jeans and flannel shirts, walked over to greet him. The absurdity of the scene was not lost on me. The two simple farmers, greeting the emissary from a fairy tale kingdom. "Mr. Hayes, Mrs. Hayes," he said. Shaking our hands, his handshake was firm, his eyes direct. "Thank you so much for agreeing to see me. It is an honor to finally meet you. Please, call me Liam," my husband said with his easy, disarming smile. "And this is Annalise. Can we offer you some lemonade?" "That would be lovely, thank you," he said. We sat at our big, scarred, Wooden kitchen table. The same table where we sorted seeds and paid our bills. I served the pie and lemonade, the simple, rustic fare feeling almost comically out of place in the presence of this formal, elegant man. Mr. Hoffman took a polite sip of his lemonade. Then he placed his leather briefcase on the table and opened it with 2 sharp clicks. I know that the letter you received must have seemed unusual, he began, his voice calm and serious. And I am sure you have many questions. I am here to answer them. I will not waste your time with pleasantries. I am here on a matter of the utmost gravity for my country. He took out a large, rolled-up document and spread it out on the table. It was a beautiful, hand-drawn genealogical chart, a family tree, its branches stretching back through the centuries. At the very top, in ornate script, was the name Duke Wilhelm Farbers of Altenburg, B. 1820. Mr. Hayes, he said, his eyes finding Liam's, I must ask you what you know of your family's history, your paternal line. Liam shrugged. Not much, to be honest. My dad was an only child. His father died when he was young. I know my great-grandfather was a farmer, too. That's about all I know. We're just farmers from upstate New York. Mr. Hoffman nodded slowly. That is the story as the world knew it, but it is not the complete story. He then pulled out a small leather-bound photograph album. He opened it to the first page. There was a faded, sepia-toned photograph of a handsome, serious-looking young man in a formal, high-collared military uniform from the 19th century. This, he said, is Prince August Maximilian Friedrich of Altenburg, born in 1855. He was the younger brother of Duke Wilhelm II. He was, by all accounts, a romantic, a poet, and a bit of a rebel. He then told us the story, a story so incredible, so impossible. It felt like a dream. Prince August, a second son with no prospect of inheriting the throne, had fallen desperately in love with a commoner, a governess in the royal household. His family had forbidden the match, so, in 1882, August did the unthinkable. He wrote a letter to his brother, the Duke, renouncing his title, his name, and his claim to the family fortune. He took his beloved governess, and they boarded a ship to America, to start a new life where they could be together, free from the strictures of their old world, to disappear completely. He had changed his name, just slightly, from Altenburg to Hayes. He had used what little money he had to buy a plot of land in rural New York, and the prince had become a farmer. Mr. Hoffman traced a line on the genealogical chart with his finger. From Prince August, it went down through the generations, to his son, then his grandson, Liam's grandfather, and finally, to Liam. The family in Altenburg eventually lost all contact with August's line. He explained, it was assumed, after a generation or two, that it had simply died out. He then pulled out another set of documents, newspaper clippings, official-looking reports. His expression grew somber. But 6 months ago, he said, his voice quiet, a tragedy occurred. The reigning Duke, Friedrich IV, and his only son and heir, Prince Stefan, were killed in an avalanche while skiing in the Alps. He let the weight of those words settle in the quiet kitchen. The Duke's death left our country without a direct heir for the past 6 months. Our chancellery has been engaged in an exhaustive, worldwide genealogical search to find any living, legitimate descendant of the House of Altenburg. The search was a difficult one, but it eventually led us here, to this farm, to you. Liam? My mind was reeling. I looked at Liam. He was staring at the photograph of the young, serious prince, his face pale with a shock so profound he seemed to have stopped breathing. Mr. Hoffman delivered the final, world-altering blow. As the last surviving, direct male descendant of Prince August, he said, his voice now full of a formal, legal gravity. You are the sole, legitimate heir to the ducal throne, by the laws of succession of our nation, which have been unbroken for 500 years. The title and all its rights, properties, and responsibilities now pass to you. He looked directly at my husband, the man who had been fixing a fence post just an hour before. Mr. Hayes, he said, it is my solemn and official duty to be the first to address you by your proper title, Your Serene Highness. Duke Liam of Altenburg. The silence that followed was absolute. The only sound was the ticking of the old clock on our wall, a sound that seemed to be marking time in a world that no longer made any sense. Liam just stared at him, his face a blank mask of disbelief. "I know this is a lot to process," Mr. Hoffman said gently. He opened his briefcase again and took out a thick, leather-bound folder, embossed with the same golden coat of arms. "This contains everything. The legal documents confirming your lineage, a copy of the Constitution of Altenburg, a full accounting of the ducal estate, which includes the royal palace, several thousand acres of land, and significant financial holdings." He pushed the folder across the table. Liam didn't touch it. He just stared at it as if it were a venomous snake. "I finally found my voice. My father," I whispered, the words coming out without my permission. He called him the Duke of Dirt. A hysterical laugh bubbled up in my throat, and I had to clap a hand over my mouth to stifle it. It was real. The joke was real. The absurd, impossible, ridiculous fantasy was the God's honest truth. My husband, my quiet, gentle, unassuming husband, the simple farmer from upstate New York, was a duke, a real, actual, honest-to-goodness European ruler. Our simple life, our quiet kingdom of dirt and vegetables and love, was over, and a new, terrifying, an utterly unbelievable life was just beginning. We were standing on the precipice of a fairy tale, and I had no idea if we were about to fly or if we were about to fall. Mr. Hoffman left our farm at 4 o'clock, his black Mercedes gliding silently down our gravel driveway like a departing spaceship, leaving a cloud of dust and unreality in its wake. Liam and I were left alone at our kitchen table, in the wreckage of our simple, quiet life. The only evidence that the last 2 hours had actually happened was the thick, leather-bound folder sitting between us, its golden coat of arms gleaming in the afternoon sun. For a long time, neither of us spoke. We just stared at the folder. It felt like a bomb, a beautiful, elegantly wrapped bomb that had already detonated, and we were just now beginning to feel the shockwave. Finally, Liam pushed his chair back, stood up, and began to pace the length of our small kitchen. He ran his hands through his hair, his face a mask of utter, profound bewilderment. "This is insane," he said, his voice a low, strangled whisper. He said it again, louder this time, as if trying to convince himself. "This is completely, certifiably insane." He stopped pacing and looked at me, his eyes wide and full of a panic I had never seen before. "Annie, I'm not a duke. I grow kale. I fix tractors. I know the difference between 13 different kinds of soil. Dukes don't know about soil, do they?" A hysterical bubble of laughter escaped my lips. It was a wild, uncontrollable sound. "I don't know. Liam, I don't think it was covered in my Vassar curriculum. There was no intro to European duchies class." My laughter broke the tension, and he started laughing too. A deep, rumbling, incredulous laugh that seemed to shake the very foundations of our little farmhouse. We were two simple people who had just been handed a fairy tale, and our first reaction was to recognize its complete and utter absurdity. What do you do when you find out your husband, the man you thought you knew better than your own soul, is secretly a prince? There's no instruction manual for this. One day you're worried about aphids on your tomato plants, and the next you're trying to figure out the correct way to address a baron and whether your beat-up pickup truck qualifies as a royal chariot. It was the most ridiculous, most terrifying, most wonderful identity crisis in the world. When our laughter finally subsided, we were left with the quiet, heavy reality of the folder on the table. "Okay," I said, taking a deep breath and pulling the folder towards me. "Let's be logical about this. Let's look at the evidence." For the next few hours, we became detectives, poring over the contents of the folder Mr. Hoffman had left behind. It was a meticulous, undeniable paper trail of Liam's secret history. There were copies of birth certificates, marriage licenses from the 19th century, ship manifests from Ellis Island with the name August Hayes on it. There was a beautiful, hand-drawn family tree that looked like something out of a museum, and there was a faded photograph of a handsome young man with Liam's eyes, Prince August, standing next to a pretty, serious-looking young woman, his governess. the woman he had given up a kingdom for. It was a love story so epic, so romantic. It felt like fiction, but it was real. And it had led, through a century of farming and quiet, anonymous living, directly to my husband. But it was the modern documents in the folder that truly made it real. There was a copy of the Constitution of the Duchy of Altenburg, with the articles of succession highlighted. There was a detailed portfolio of the ducal estate, which included not just a castle Schloss Altenburg, but also significant landholdings, a portfolio of blue-chip stocks, and several very, very large bank accounts in Switzerland. I read the numbers aloud, my voice a disbelieving whisper. The amount of money was staggering. It was a fortune that made my own father's wealth look like pocket change. Liam just shook his head, a dazed look on his face. "I don't want it," he said quietly. "I don't want any of it. What am I supposed to do with a castle, Annie? The property taxes must be a nightmare." I looked at him, at my husband, the man in the worn denim jeans and the flannel shirt, and I saw the true weight of what had happened land on his shoulders. He wasn't just inheriting a fortune. He was inheriting a country, a responsibility. "You're still Liam," I said softly, taking his hand. It was calloused and strong, the hand of a man who worked the earth. It was not the hand of a duke. "You're just Liam with a very strange, very complicated new job description." We spent the evening in a state of surreal humor, trying on our new identities for size. "So, if you're a duke, what does that make me?" I asked, as we were washing the dinner dishes. "A duchess, I suppose," he said, looking at the soap suds on his hands as if he'd never seen them before. "Her Serene Highness, Duchess Anneliese of Altenburg," I said, testing the words in my mouth. They felt ridiculous. I curtsied, a clumsy, dramatic gesture, splashing soap bubbles onto the floor. "Your Highness, the chickens need to be put away for the night." He burst out laughing again. "I think that's a job for the royal poultry manager, don't you?" That was how we coped. We made jokes. We wrapped the absurdity around us like a blanket, because the reality was too big, too terrifying to face head-on. The reality came calling the next morning, in the form of another phone call from Mr. Hoffman. The humor of the situation evaporated the moment I heard his polite, formal voice. "Your Serene Highness," he said. When Liam took the phone, I watched my husband physically flinch at the title. "Please, call me Liam," he said, his voice strained. "As you wish." "For now, sir," Mr. Hoffman replied smoothly. "I am calling to discuss the necessary next steps. We must begin the process of expediting your new Altenburg passport, which will require a visit to the consulate in New York City. We will also need a formal, written response to the official notice of investiture by the end of the month. This is a constitutional requirement." He continued, his voice a calm, relentless stream of logistical demands. "Furthermore, the Ducal Council has formally requested your presence in Altenburg for an introductory session as soon as can be arranged. They are, as you can imagine, quite anxious to meet their new head of state." This wasn't a joke anymore. This was a series of deadlines. This was a constitutional requirement. This was a council of people waiting for their leader. Liam listened, his face growing paler with every word. When he hung up the phone, he looked at me, all the humor gone from his eyes, replaced by a deep, profound sense of being overwhelmed. "They want me to go there," he said, "to Altenburg, to address a council." We were quiet for a long time. We sat on our porch swing, our favorite place in the world, and we watched the sun begin to set over our fields. This was our life. The life he had chosen, the life I had chosen with him, and now, a ghost from a century ago had arrived to tear it all down. "My great-great-grandfather," Liam said softly, his voice full of a new wonder. "He ran away from all of this. He gave up a title, a castle, a fortune, all for love, to come here and be a simple farmer." "He did," I said. "And now they want me to run back to it," he said, shaking his head. "I don't know if I can do that. Annie, this is who I am." He held up his calloused, dirt-stained hands. "I'm a farmer, I'm not a duke." This was the heart of it. His crisis was not about the money or the castle. It was about his identity. He was a man who knew exactly who he was, and the world was now trying to tell him he was someone else entirely. "You don't have to do anything you don't want to do," I said, my voice firm. You can say no. You can tell them thank you, but no thank you. You can be like your ancestor and choose this life. No one is forcing you. He was quiet for a long time, watching the last sliver of the sun dip below the horizon. He ran away from his responsibility, didn't he? Liam said, his voice thoughtful. For love? Yes, but he still ran away. He turned to look at me. It's not just a title. Is it what Hoffman said? It's a country. A small one. Maybe. But it's full of real people. People who just lost their leader. People who are, apparently, now, my people. And in that moment, I saw the man I had fallen in love with. The man with the quiet sense of duty. The man with the unshakable integrity. His sense of responsibility. The very quality that made him a good farmer who tended his land and his animals with such care, was now wrestling with this new, impossibly larger responsibility. I think, he said slowly, his voice full of a new, reluctant resolve. I think I have to go. I have to see it. I have to understand what it is I'm inheriting. I owe it to them, the people there, and I owe it to him, the prince who became a farmer. The decision was made. A quiet, momentous decision made on a porch swing in upstate New York. As the fireflies began to light up the twilight, we were going to Altenburg. A new, thrilling, and terrifying thought shot through me. My father, my arrogant, snobbish father, who had mocked my husband for years, who had called him the Duke of Dirt. My husband was now, officially, a duke, which meant that I, Annalise Sterling Vance, the daughter he had written off as a disappointment, was about to become a duchess. A slow, dangerous smile spread across my face. I had a phone call I needed to make, but not yet. Not until we were standing on the marble floor of Schloss Altenburg. The joke was about to have the punchline of a lifetime, and I was going to deliver it in person. The decision to tell my father was mine, and mine alone. After Liam had agreed to travel to Altenburg, to at least see the country he had unknowingly inherited. A quiet, cold resolve settled over me. For years, I had endured my father's mockery, his disappointment, his endless cutting little jokes about my husband's profession. I had absorbed his snobbery and let it bounce off the shield of my own happiness. But this was different. This was a truth so monumental, so utterly, poetically ironic, that it demanded to be seen. It was a checkmate that needed to be delivered in person. A quiet phone call wouldn't do. I wanted to see his face when the man he had dismissed as a simple farmer was revealed to be a sovereign European ruler. We have to have him over for dinner before we leave, I told Liam one evening. He looked at me, a worried expression in his kind eyes. Annie, are you sure? Why put yourself through that? We can just go. We don't owe him an explanation. I know, I said, but this isn't for him. This is for me. I need to do this. He understood. He didn't push. He just nodded and said, Okay, what's the plan? The plan was simple. I called my father the next day. Dad, I said, my voice carefully neutral. Liam and I would like to have you over for dinner this Saturday night. There's something important we'd like to discuss with you before we go away for a little while. I could hear the condescending smirk in his voice. Go away, don't tell me. Has the Duke of Dirt finally decided to sell the farm and take you on a cruise? By all means. I'll be there. This I have to see. He thought we were coming to him with our tails between our legs. He thought we were finally admitting defeat, that our simple life had failed and we needed his help. He was walking into the ambush with a song in his heart. On Saturday, I spent the day preparing for dinner. I didn't try to impress him. I didn't cook a fancy meal with French sauces and complicated techniques. I made the food of my life, of our life. I made a simple, beautiful roast chicken with herbs from my garden. I made a salad with the sweet, sun-ripened tomatoes we had grown ourselves. And for dessert, I made the same apple pie my mother used to make, from the apples from the old tree in our orchard. The house smelled of rosemary, and thyme, and home. He arrived at 7 o'clock sharp, pulling up in his dark gray Jaguar, a car that looked like an alien spaceship parked next to our muddy pickup truck. He walked into our cozy, slightly cluttered farmhouse kitchen and looked around with an expression of profound disdain, as if he were a health inspector visiting a failing restaurant. Charming, he said, the word a poisoned dart. Dinner was a masterclass in his particular brand of psychological warfare. He ignored me almost completely, focusing all his energy on Liam. His words a relentless barrage of condescending questions and backhanded compliments. "So, Liam," he began, taking a small suspicious sip of the local wine I had poured for him. "Annalise tells me you have some important news. Let me guess. You've finally seen the light. You're selling this experiment and moving back to civilization to get a real job." "I like my job, Edward," Liam said calmly, his voice even. He was a rock. He refused to be baited. "Of course, you do," my father said with a dismissive wave of his hand. "It's a lovely hobby. But a man has a duty to provide for his family, for my daughter. You can't do that by growing carrots." "We do all right," Liam said, his smile never faltering. "We eat well. We have a roof over our heads. We're happy." "Happiness doesn't pay the bills," my father sniffed. "Happiness doesn't get you a membership at the yacht club. Happiness doesn't build a legacy." He spent the next hour expounding on his own success, on the importance of ambition, on the necessity of a good portfolio. He was lecturing my husband, a man who possessed more integrity in his little finger than my father had in his entire body, on how to be a man. It was excruciating, and I just let it happen. I watched my father dig his own grave deeper and deeper with every arrogant, self-important word. We had arranged it all with Mr. Hoffman. He was to arrive at precisely 8:30, as we were serving dessert. At 8:29, right on cue, the headlights of a large dark car swept across our kitchen windows. My father looked up, annoyed. "Are you expecting more company? Don't tell me you've invited the entire farmer's market over for pie." A small smile touched my lips. "Something like that," I said. "It's a business associate of Liam's. He's just stopping by to have him sign some papers." My father scoffed. "A business associate, does he sell artisanal pitchforks?" I stood up and went to the door. I opened it to see Mr. Hoffman standing on our porch, looking impossibly elegant and formal in his dark suit. "Good evening, Annalise," he said, his voice a low, respectful murmur, but he wasn't looking at me. He was looking past me, at my husband. I stepped aside and let him in. He walked into our small, rustic kitchen, his presence immediately changing the atmosphere in the room. He was a creature from a different world, a world of power and protocol. He walked directly to the table, stopped beside Liam, and gave a slight, formal, and utterly correct bow from the neck. "Your Grace," he said, his voice resonating in the suddenly silent kitchen. "I apologize for the late-night intrusion. The final travel documents from the consulate have just arrived. They require your signature." I kept my eyes fixed on my father. It was a beautiful thing to watch. His face went through a series of the most remarkable transformations. First, there was confusion. He looked from the impeccably dressed Mr. Hoffman to my husband, who was sitting there in his worn flannel shirt. "Your Grace," he repeated, a short, barking laugh of disbelief escaping his lips. "What is this nonsense? Is this some kind of joke?" Mr. Hoffman turned his calm, questioning eyes on my father. He clearly had no idea who this rude, unimpressed man was. "I beg your pardon, sir." "Don't beg my pardon," my father snapped, his arrogance still his default setting. "Who are you, and why are you calling this farmer your Grace?" Mr. Hoffman's expression of polite confusion did not change. "My name is Klaus Hoffman," he said, his voice still perfectly even. "I am the Chancellor to His Serene Highness, Duke Liam of Altenburg." He gestured to Liam, my husband, the farmer. I watched my father's brain try to process the words. Chancellor, Duke, Altenburg. I saw the moment that his memory connected to the silly letter I had told him about weeks ago. The letter he had mocked. The joke he had found so hilarious. The color began to drain from his face. His smug, confident expression began to crumble, like a sandcastle in a rising tide. Mr. Hoffman, oblivious to the family drama he had just walked into, placed a thick, important-looking document, embossed with the golden coat of arms of Altenburg, on the table in front of Liam. "If you would just sign here, Your Grace," he said, pointing to a line at the bottom. My father's eyes were glued to the golden coat of arms on the document, the roaring lion, the sheaf of wheat, the crown. He stared at it, his mouth now hanging slightly agape, a look of pure, slack-jawed disbelief on his face. The man he had called the Duke of Dirt was a duke. It was real, all of it. The smugness was gone. The arrogance was gone. The condescension was gone. All that was left was the raw, panicked, and utterly horrified face of a man who had just realized he has made a mistake of catastrophic, world-altering proportions. He had spent 5 years mocking a man who had a higher title, more land, and vastly more wealth and power than he could ever dream of. He had insulted a duke to his face, repeatedly. He shot to his feet, his chair scraping loudly against the wooden floor. His entire demeanor changed. He became a fawning, bowing, pathetic creature I had never seen before. "Your Grace," he stammered, looking at Liam with a new, terrified respect. I apologize. I had no idea." Annalise failed to explain the situation properly. He was already trying to throw me under the bus. Liam just looked at him, his expression calm and unreadable. He slowly, deliberately signed the document. My father then turned to Mr. Hoffman, his face now a mask of oily, desperate charm, a chancellor from Altenburg. "How fascinating I am, Edward Sterling. Annalise's father, my firm, Sterling Equity, does a great deal of business in Europe. Perhaps we could have a discussion about potential investment opportunities in your country." Mr. Hoffman looked at my father with a look of polite disinterest. "Perhaps," he said coolly. "My office will be in touch to schedule a meeting with your office, if His Grace wishes it." He then turned back to Liam, giving another slight bow. "Thank you, Your Grace. I will take my leave. The car will be here to collect you and the Duchess for your flight at 6 a.m. He nodded politely to me, "Your Grace," and then he turned and walked out of our house, leaving a trail of absolute, devastating silence in his wake. The three of us were left in the kitchen. My father was still standing, his face a mess of shame, panic, and a desperate, greedy hope. Liam was quietly eating his apple pie, and I was just watching. "A duke," my father whispered, staring at Liam as if he were a holy apparition. "You're a duke." "So they tell me," Liam said quietly, not looking up. "Annalise," my father said, turning to me, his voice a frantic, pleading whine. "Why didn't you tell me? Why did you let me? Why didn't you say anything?" I finally looked at him, and I gave him a small, quiet, and utterly unforgiving smile. "I tried to, Dad," I said, many, many times. "You just weren't listening." I stood up and began to clear the plates from the table. The greatest performance of my life was over, and I had not had to say a single word. The truth, in all its glorious, absurd, and poetic justice, had done all the talking for me. The silence that fell over our small kitchen after Mr. Hoffman's departure was a new kind of silence. It wasn't the peaceful, comfortable quiet that Liam and I were used to. It was a loud, ringing, world-altering silence, filled with the ghosts of princes and the impossible weight of a crown. My father was the first to break it. His entire being had undergone a seismic shift in the last 10 minutes. The arrogant, condescending titan of industry was gone, replaced by a fawning, sputtering, and deeply pathetic courtier. "A duke," he said again, his voice a breathy, incredulous whisper. He looked at Liam with a new, terrifying reverence, as if my husband had suddenly started to glow. "My goodness, Liam, Your Grace, I had no idea. You must have thought me a complete and utter fool." Liam, who was still staring at the ducal seal on the document Mr. Hoffman had left behind, just shook his head slowly. "I don't know what to think." "Edward," he said quietly. "Well, we must celebrate," my father declared, his voice now full of a desperate, manic energy. He was scrambling, trying to find his footing in this new reality where his farmer son-in-law outranked him in every conceivable way. "This is a momentous occasion. I have a bottle of 1982 Chateau Margaux in the car. We must open it immediately to toast. To toast Altenburg." "Dad," I said, my voice quiet but firm, cutting through his frantic performance, "it's late, and Liam and I have a very early flight to catch in the morning. I think it's time for you to go home." It was the first time in my life I had ever dismissed him, and the look on his face was a wonder to behold. He looked like a dog who had just been kicked by his favorite master. He opened his mouth to protest, to reassert his authority, but then he looked at Liam, at the man he now saw as a duke, and his mouth snapped shut. He just nodded meekly. "Of course, Darling, he said, his voice now small. You're right. You both need your rest. A big day tomorrow. He backed towards the door, his movements clumsy and uncertain. I'll call you, he said to Liam. We must discuss investments, opportunities. And then he was gone, his Jaguar crunching on our gravel driveway as he sped away, back to his own much smaller, much less significant kingdom. Liam and I stood in the silent kitchen for a long time. Then he looked at me, and a slow, weary smile touched his lips. The Duke of Dirt, he said softly. Her Grace, the farmer's wife, I replied. And we stood there, holding on to each other, two ordinary people on the precipice of an extraordinary, terrifying new life. The trip to Altenburg was like stepping through a portal into a fairy tale. A private jet, sent by the Ducal Council, flew us to Zurich, where a black car with a diplomatic flag was waiting to drive us the final 2 hours through the breathtaking scenery of the Alps. We crossed an unmarked border, and suddenly we were in a country so beautiful it didn't seem real. Altenburg was a tiny, verdant valley, a jewel box of impossibly green fields, pristine alpine villages, and, looming over it all, a magnificent, storybook castle perched on a cliffside, Schloss Altenburg, our new home. The entire population of the duchy, it seemed, had turned out to greet their new, long-lost duke. They lined the cobblestone streets, waving small flags bearing the lion and the wheat, their faces full of a quiet, hopeful curiosity. They were not cheering for a celebrity. They were welcoming home a piece of their own lost history. As we drove through the massive iron gates of the castle, Liam gripped my hand, his own hand, the calloused, strong hand of a farmer, trembling slightly. Annie, he whispered, his eyes wide with a mixture of terror and awe. What have we gotten ourselves into? The year that followed was a surreal, challenging, and ultimately a beautiful education. It was an education in history, in governance, and in what it truly means to be a leader. Liam, the man who had been so reluctant to accept the title, rose to the occasion with the same quiet, steady sense of duty that he had always applied to his farm. He met with the Ducal Council. He studied the country's laws. He walked the fields and spoke to the local farmers, not as their duke, but as a fellow man of the soil. He discovered that Altenburg's primary industry, agriculture, was struggling, bound by outdated, inefficient traditions. And he, the Duke of Dirt, knew exactly what to do. We did not abandon our farm in New York. We integrated it. We spent that first year creating the Altenburg Agricultural Initiative, a program funded by the ducal estate to modernize the country's farms. We brought in soil experts. We invested in sustainable, organic farming practices. We started a co-op to help the local farmers sell their produce to the rest of Europe. We were doing exactly what we had always done, nurturing the land, helping things grow. We just had a much, much bigger garden now. And I found my own role. As Her Grace, the Duchess of Altenburg, I was suddenly the head of a dozen different cultural trusts and foundations. My degree in art history, which my father had dismissed as a frivolous, useless pursuit, was now my greatest asset. I began overseeing the restoration of the castle's magnificent, but neglected, art collection. I started a foundation in the name of Liam's ancestor, Prince August, and his governess wife, a foundation dedicated to providing educational opportunities for the young women of Altenburg. I was no longer just a supportive wife. I was a partner, helping to build a new future for this tiny, beautiful country that had claimed us as its own. We split our time between the quiet, green valley of Altenburg and the quiet, green hills of our farm in New York. We had 2 homes, 2 lives, and we were happier than I had ever thought possible. My father, of course, was a constant, buzzing presence in the background. His initial, fawning shock had morphed into a desperate, relentless campaign to ingratiate himself with us, to leverage our newfound status for his own gain. The phone calls were a weekly occurrence. Annalise, darling, he would boom, his voice full of a false, hearty warmth. I was just having lunch with a man from the State Department. I mentioned my son-in-law, the Duke of Altenburg, and he was fascinated. We must arrange a meeting. Or I've been speaking with some colleagues who manage a massive fund for agricultural technology. A perfect fit for Liam's little projects over there. I can set up a presentation for him. We were always polite, and we were always firm. Thank you for the thought, Dad, I would say, my voice pleasant but impenetrable. But Liam has his own team of advisors for that now. He's quite busy. We invited him to Altenburg once. He came for a week, expecting to be treated as the father of the Duchess, a visiting royal instead. He was treated as what he was, just another guest. He was given a tour. He was invited to a formal dinner, but he was given no special access, no business meetings, no share of the power he so desperately craved. He spent the week wandering the halls of our castle, a small, diminished man, completely out of his depth. The power dynamic had been permanently, irrevocably, and satisfyingly reversed. He now craved our approval, and it was a currency we refused to spend. This morning, I am sitting in my favorite room in the castle, a small, sun-filled library that overlooks the entire valley. A year ago, I was a farmer's wife, a disappointment to my status-obsessed father. Today, I am a duchess, but the title, I have learned, is the least interesting thing about my new life. It didn't change Liam. It didn't change our love. It didn't change our values. It just gave us a bigger platform to live them out. Liam was always a duke in character long before he was a duke in title. He was a responsible, dutiful, and kind man, a good steward of everything that was entrusted to him. The title just gave him a bigger farm to tend. My father's worth was always tied to his name, his money, his status. And when he was confronted with a man who had more status than he did, a man he had deemed worthless, his entire universe collapsed. He had spent his life judging the book by its cover, and he had made a fool of himself when he was finally forced to read the pages. The greatest gift Liam's inheritance gave us was not the castle, or the money, or the title. It was the clarity. It was the final, irrefutable proof that the life we had chosen, the simple life of hard work and quiet integrity, was the one that held the true, lasting value. And that is a lesson that is worth more than any crown. Thank you for listening to my story. If there's anyone in your life who tries to make you feel small, who judges you based on a shallow, materialistic set of values, remember this. Your worth is not determined by your job title, or your bank account, or the name you marry. It is determined by your character, by your integrity, by your kindness. Live a life that is true to your own values, and you will always be royalty in the kingdom of your own life. Hit that subscribe button if you believe in happy endings, fairy tales, and the simple, quiet dignity of a good farmer. And remember to always choose the man who works the dirt over the one who just thinks he owns the world. The real treasure is always in the soil.